The skill that makes losing money nearly impossible has nothing to do with winning. In fact, the traders who master this skill lose more often than they win. Sounds insane, right? But here's what nobody tells you. Your obsession with being right is the exact thing bankrupting you. Every single day, profitable traders are losing, sometimes 4, 5, 6 times in a row, and they're completely fine. Meanwhile, you win 3 trades, lose 1, and you're spiraling. The difference isn't luck or intelligence. It's a skill so counterintuitive that when I first explain it, your brain will reject it. But once you see it, once you really understand what I'm about to show you, trading becomes almost boringly simple. And that terror you feel every time you click buy, it just disappears. I want to start by telling you something that might make you uncomfortable. You don't have a trading problem. You don't have a strategy problem. You don't even have a discipline problem. What you have is a relationship problem with uncertainty. And until you fix that relationship, until you develop the one skill I'm going to share with you today, you could study for 10 more years. You could master every indicator. You could backtest 1,000 strategies, and you would still blow accounts. Because here's the truth that nobody wants to admit. The reason 95% of traders lose money has nothing to do with their technical knowledge. Most losing traders actually know more about technical analysis than winning traders. They can draw better trend lines. They know more patterns. They've studied more books, but they're missing one single psychological skill, just one. And without it, all that knowledge is completely useless. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking this is going to be another lecture about controlling your emotions or following your plan, but it's not. Because those aren't real solutions. That's like telling someone who's drowning to just swim better. It doesn't address the root cause. The skill I'm talking about is something much deeper. It's the ability to think in probabilities instead of certainties. It's the ability to separate your self-worth from your trading results. It's the ability to accept all possible outcomes before you enter a trade. And when you develop this skill, something incredible happens. Losing stops hurting. Not because you're in denial, not because you've become careless, but because you've fundamentally changed how you relate to uncertainty. And I'm going to be completely honest with you. This took me 15 years to figure out. 15 years of suffering. 15 years of being my own worst enemy. I would have the perfect setup, everything aligned, and then I would sabotage it with fear. Or I would skip an obvious opportunity because I couldn't handle being wrong again. Every loss felt like evidence that I was a failure. Every stopped-out position confirmed my deepest fear that I wasn't good enough. And here's what breaks my heart. I see you doing the exact same thing. I see it in your questions. I see it in your frustration. You think you need a better strategy, but what you actually need is to develop the one skill that finally separates your self-worth from your profit and loss. The skill that makes you psychologically anti-fragile. So today, I'm going to give you that skill. I'm going to break it down in a way that's so simple, so clear, that you'll be able to start applying it to your very next trade. And I'm going to show you why the traders who make consistent money aren't smarter than you. They're not braver. They're not special. They've just developed this one skill that you're about to learn. Let me start with a story, a metaphor that's going to change how you see everything. I want you to imagine you're in a casino, but you're not there as a gambler. You're there as the dealer. You're standing behind a blackjack table, and you're dealing cards to players all night long, hand after hand after hand. Hundreds of hands, maybe thousands. Some hands, the players win. They celebrate, they pump their fists, they take money from the house, the chips slide across the table. Other hands, the house wins. The players lose their bets. Some of them get frustrated. Some of them leave. And here's what's absolutely fascinating. You, as the dealer, feel nothing about any of this. When a player wins big, when they hit blackjack and take a huge payout, you don't panic. You don't think, "Oh no, I'm losing. I'm a terrible dealer. Maybe I should quit this job." You don't take it personally. When the house wins, when the player busts, and you take their chips, you don't celebrate like you accomplished something amazing. You don't think, "I'm so smart, I'm so good at this." You just deal the next hand. Why? Why is there this complete emotional neutrality? Because you understand something fundamental about probability. You're playing a game over thousands of hands. Any single outcome is completely irrelevant. You're not emotionally invested in individual results because you absolutely know, that the edge always wins over time. The house has a mathematical advantage, and over enough hands, that advantage becomes certainty. One hand doesn't matter. 10 hands don't matter. Even 100 hands might show variance, but over thousands of hands the math takes over. The edge reveals itself. And because you understand this at a deep level, you can watch individual losses without any emotional reaction. Now, most traders approach the market like gamblers, not dealers. Every single trade is personal. Every loss is a judgment on their skill, on their intelligence, on their worth as a human being. Every win is validation that they're smart, that they're talented, that they deserve to be here. And that emotional investment, that merger between identity and outcome, makes it impossible to execute consistently. But the traders who win, the ones who make losing money nearly impossible over time, they've made a fundamental shift. They've learned to be the dealer, not the gambler. They understand that trading is a probability game where you don't and you can't know what will happen on any individual trade. They've stopped trying to be right on every trade. They've stopped trying to predict the future. Instead, they've embraced something completely different. They've embraced the idea that they have an edge that plays out over many trades, and any single trade is just one hand in an infinite game. And here's where it gets really interesting. When you make that shift, when you truly internalize that perspective, everything changes. The fear disappears, not because you're suppressing it, not because you're pretending to be tough, but because there's nothing to be afraid of anymore. You're not gambling your identity on one outcome. You're executing a process that you know works over time. Let me give you another way to think about this, another story that might click for you. Think about a surgeon walking into an operating room. Someone's life is literally in their hands. The stakes couldn't possibly be higher. A human being's survival depends on their skill, their decisions, their execution, and yet their hands don't shake. Their mind doesn't spiral into catastrophic thinking. They're completely present and completely calm. Why? How is that possible? How can someone operate under those conditions without emotional collapse? Because they've developed a skill called detached engagement. They care deeply about the outcome. They want the patient to live. They're not callous or indifferent, but they're not emotionally merged with that outcome. They know, they've been trained to understand, that they can do everything right and still lose the patient. They also know they can make a small mistake and still save a life. Their identity isn't riding on every single surgery. They've accepted that they're working with probabilities, with human bodies that are complex and unpredictable, with situations that involve variables they cannot control. And that acceptance doesn't make them careless. It doesn't make them sloppy. It actually makes them better. It makes them more focused, more precise, more present. The worst surgeon is the one who's so terrified of losing a patient that their hands shake. The one who takes it so personally that they second-guess every decision. The one who can't sleep for weeks after a bad outcome because they've made it mean something about their worth as a doctor, as a person. Now translate this directly to trading. You are the surgeon. The market is the patient. And every trade is an operation where you can do everything perfectly and still lose the patient. You can also make mistakes and still get lucky with a win. The skill that makes losing money nearly impossible is the same skill the surgeon has developed. It's the ability to execute your edge without emotional attachment to any single outcome. It's the ability to care about your process without being destroyed by results you cannot control. And I know what you're thinking right now. You're thinking, okay, Mark, that sounds great in theory, but how? How do I actually develop that skill? How do I care enough to take trading seriously, but not so much that every loss destroys me? How do I find that balance between discipline and detachment? That's exactly what I'm going to show you. But first, you need to understand why you're stuck. You need to understand what's been programmed into you that makes this skill so difficult to develop. Here's the thing. Everything in your life has taught you the opposite of this skill. Think about it. School rewarded right answers. If you got an A, you were smart. If you got an F, you were dumb. Work punishes mistakes. If you mess up a project, you get reprimanded, maybe fired. Society judges you based on success. Your worth is measured by your achievements, your wins, your visible successes. So your brain has been trained for decades to believe that outcomes equal identity. Good outcomes mean you're good. Bad outcomes mean you're bad. And when you bring that framework into trading, it absolutely destroys you. Because trading doesn't work that way. Trading is probabilistic. You can make perfect decisions and lose. You can make terrible decisions and win. The outcome of any individual trade tells you almost nothing about the quality of your decision-making. But your brain doesn't know that. Your brain is still operating on the old framework. Win equals good, loss equals bad. And that's why you can't execute your plan. That's why you move your stops. That's why you skip good setups. That's why you revenge trade, because every trade has become an identity referendum. Every click of the mouse is a test of your worth, and that's an impossible burden to carry. So the first component of this skill is learning to think in probabilities instead of certainties. Right now, you think in binary terms. This trade will either work or it won't. I'm either right or I'm wrong. I'm either a good trader or a bad trader. Everything is black and white. Everything is pass or fail. But the market doesn't work in binaries. The market works in probabilities. Your edge, if you have one, might win 60% of the time. That's a good edge. That's profitable. But it means 40% of the time you're quote-unquote wrong. You're losing. And if you interpret those 40% of trades as evidence that you're a bad trader, you will never be able to execute that edge consistently. Let me make this really concrete. Imagine you have a coin that's weighted to land on heads 60% of the time. If you flip that coin 100 times, you'll get roughly 60 heads and 40 tails. Now, if you flip it 10 times and get 6 tails and 4 heads, are you a bad coin flipper? Did you do something wrong? Of course not. That's just variance. That's probability playing out in the short term. But that's exactly how most traders think about their results. They take their edge, which might be profitable over 100 trades, and they judge it based on the last 5 trades. They have 3 losses in a row and think my system is broken. I'm terrible at this. I need to find a new strategy. They're judging long-term probability based on short-term variance. And it's killing them. So here's what you need to internalize. Here's what you need to say to yourself before every single trade. I have an edge that plays out over many trades. This individual trade is completely unknowable and totally irrelevant to my long-term success. I genuinely do not know what will happen here, and that's perfectly okay. This isn't positive thinking. This isn't affirmation fluff. This is truth. This is reality. You literally do not know what will happen on this trade. You can't know. The market is influenced by millions of participants with different time frames, different information, different goals. There are variables you can't see and can't control. But here's the paradox that confuses everyone. If you don't know what will happen, why trade at all? Why take the risk? Because probability isn't about knowing. Probability is about edges that play out over time. You can be completely uncertain about the individual outcome and completely certain about the aggregate outcome. That's the entire game. Think about a casino again. The casino has no idea who's going to win the next hand of blackjack. They don't know and they don't care. But they know with absolute certainty that over 10,000 hands, they're going to make money. The math guarantees it. You need to approach trading the same way. You don't know what will happen on this trade. But you know that if you execute your edge correctly over 100 trades, you'll be profitable. And once you truly accept that, once you stop trying to know the unknowable, everything shifts. The anxiety before entering a trade, it comes from trying to be certain about something uncertain. The devastation after a loss, it comes from thinking that loss means something about you. But when you embrace probabilistic thinking, when you really live it, both of those emotional states become irrelevant. Now, the second component of this skill is completely redefining what a loss means. Right now, when you lose a trade, here's what it means to you. I was wrong. I failed. I lost money I can't get back. This is evidence I'm not cut out for trading. Maybe I should quit. Maybe I'm not smart enough. Maybe I'll never figure this out. That's a lot of meaning attached to one trade. That's a massive psychological weight. And it makes the next trade terrifying. Because now you're not just risking money, you're risking your entire self-concept. But what if a loss just meant this? The market did something my edge didn't predict this time. That's normal. That's expected. Moving on. Same event. Completely different emotional experience. One, interpretation creates shame, fear, paralysis. The other creates neutrality and forward motion. Professional traders, the ones who've developed this skill, they've trained themselves to see losses as the cost of doing business. Like a store owner knows some inventory won't sell. Like a restaurant knows some meals will get sent back. Like a farmer knows some crops will fail. It's just part of the model. It's built into the equation. They're not happy about losses. They're not indifferent to money. But they've separated the outcome from their identity, and that separation is everything. Let me go deeper on this because it's so important. Your self-worth as a human being has nothing to do with whether a trade goes up or down. Nothing. Those are completely unrelated things. The market's movement on any given day has no bearing on your value, your intelligence, your potential, your lovability, your worth as a person. This sounds so obvious when I say it like this. Intellectually, you're nodding along. Of course, my worth isn't determined by my trades, but emotionally, most traders are completely merged. Their entire sense of self rises and falls with their profit and loss. Red P&L equals I'm worthless. Green P&L equals I'm valuable. Red equals I'm stupid. Green equals I'm smart. And that merger makes consistent execution impossible. Because when your identity is on the line, when your survival instincts are activated, you can't think clearly. You can't follow your plan. You go into fight or flight mode. You'll sabotage good trades to avoid pain. You'll hold on to bad trades to avoid admitting defeat. You'll do anything to protect your sense of self, even if it means destroying your account. So here's the practice. After every single loss, I want you to write this down. Physically, write it. This loss changes nothing about my worth or my ability. It's one data point in a probabilistic system. Do this religiously, not because it's going to make you feel better immediately. It probably won't. But because you're rewiring neural pathways. You're training your brain to separate outcome from identity. You're building new associations. And over time, this becomes automatic. You won't need to write it down anymore. The skill will be integrated. Losses will just be losses. They won't be identity crises. Now, here's the part that nobody talks about. The reason you haven't developed this skill yet isn't because you're weak. It's not because you lack discipline or intelligence. It's because you've been operating in systems your entire life that taught you the exact opposite. In school, wrong answers were punished. In work, mistakes have consequences. In society, failure is stigmatized. So of course you bring that framework to trading. Of course you think losses mean you're bad. That's what you've been trained to believe for decades. But trading is different. Trading is probabilistic. And until you unlearn those old patterns, until you build new neural pathways that understand probability, you're going to keep suffering. The third component of this skill is what I call pre-acceptance of all outcomes. Most traders enter a trade hoping for one outcome. They're attached to the win. They need it emotionally, sometimes financially. They've already spent the money in their mind. They've already decided what that win will mean about them, and that attachment creates all the destructive behaviors. When the trade goes against them, they move their stop because they can't accept the loss. They can't let go of what they needed that trade to be. Or they add to a losing position trying to prove they were right. Or they close a winner too early because they're so desperate to lock in a win, to prove to themselves that they can do this. All of this comes from attachment, from entering the trade without accepting both possible outcomes. But what if you did something completely different? What if, before you clicked buy, you had already accepted both outcomes? What if you had genuinely made peace with losing the risk amount? This is what I call the pre-mortem practice. Before every trade, ask yourself this question. If this trade hits my stop loss, will I be okay? Can I accept that outcome without it changing how I feel about myself or my system? If the answer is no, don't take the trade. The position size is too big, or you're too emotionally invested, or you're trading to prove something rather than execute your edge. But if the answer is yes, if you can genuinely say, I'm okay with either outcome, I've accepted that this might not work, then you can execute with complete freedom. No fear, no attachment, just execution. And here's the paradox of control. The moment you stop trying to control outcomes, you gain the only control that matters. Control over your process, control over your risk, control over your emotional state, control over your response. You can't control whether this trade wins. You absolutely cannot control that. The market will do what it does, but you can control whether you follow your plan. You can control your position size. You can control where you place your stop. You can control how you interpret the result. You can control what you do next. And when you focus exclusively on what you can control, when you let go of what you can't, everything changes. Trading stops being this high-stakes emotional drama and becomes a simple, repeatable process. Think about it this way. If you enter every trade having already accepted the loss, what is there to be afraid of? The worst-case scenario has already been processed. You've already made peace with it. So there's no anxiety, there's no dread, there's just execution. And if you win, great. That's wonderful, you enjoy it. But it doesn't change your self-worth because you weren't attached to it. And if you lose, that's okay too. You already accepted it, so it doesn't devastate you. This is what psychological freedom in trading looks like. It's not about being emotionless. It's about being unattached to specific outcomes while remaining fully committed to your process. So the skill that makes losing money nearly impossible isn't about winning more. It's not about finding the perfect strategy or the magic indicator. It's about making loss psychologically irrelevant. Because when loss can't hurt you emotionally, when it can't shake your confidence or trigger bad decisions, you finally have space to execute your edge consistently. And consistent execution of a valid edge is the only thing that makes money in this game. That's it. That's the whole secret. You don't need to be right 80% of the time. You don't need to catch every move. You don't need to be a genius. You just need to execute your edge over and over and over without your emotions sabotaging you. And this skill makes that possible. Now I want to give you something practical, something you can start using immediately with your very next trade. I call it the three-statement protocol. And it's simple, but it's powerful if you actually do it. Before you enter any trade, you're going to make 3 statements, out loud if possible, or write them down. But you need to make them real. You need to actually process them, not just recite them mechanically. Statement 1. Probability acknowledgement. Say this: I have an edge that works over many trades. This individual trade is unknowable and irrelevant to my long-term success. This grounds you in probabilistic thinking. It reminds you that this trade doesn't matter in the way your fear is telling you it matters. Statement 2. Outcome acceptance. Say this: I accept both outcomes of this trade. If it wins, great. If it hits my stop, that's normal and expected. Neither outcome changes my worth or my plan. Feel this in your body. Make sure you genuinely mean it. If you notice resistance, if you can't actually accept the loss, then don't take the trade. The size is too big or you're too attached. Statement 3. Process commitment. Say this: my only job is to execute my plan perfectly. I control my entry, my risk, and my response. The outcome is not my responsibility. This shifts your focus from results to process, from things you can't control to things you can. And that shift is everything. Now, after every trade, win or loss, I want you to write 1 sentence in your journal, just 1. What I learned about my execution, not about the market, not about the outcome, about your psychological state and your decision-making process. Did you follow your plan? Did you feel fear? Did you experience attachment? Did you move your stop? Did you close early? What was happening internally? This makes every trade a learning experience about developing the skill, not about being right or wrong, about market direction. And here's what I want you to do as a challenge. For your next 10 trades, your only goal is to execute this protocol perfectly. You're not trying to make money. You're trying to develop emotional neutrality around outcomes. Track this. Did I accept both outcomes before entering? Did I follow my plan regardless of fear? Did I interpret the result without self-judgment? Your success metric for these 10 trades isn't profit. It's protocol execution. And I promise you, if you do this honestly for 10 trades, you're going to notice something incredible. Trading starts to feel completely different, calmer, simpler. The anxiety starts dissolving. Because you're building the skill, you're rewiring your brain, you're creating new patterns. And this isn't a one-time thing. This is a practice you return to daily, like a surgeon practicing sutures, like a musician practicing scales. Every trade is an opportunity to strengthen this psychological muscle, and over weeks and months, it becomes automatic. You won't need the statements anymore. The skill will be integrated into who you are as a trader. Let me bring all of this together for you now. We started with a simple but powerful truth. The skill that makes losing money nearly impossible has nothing to do with winning. It's about developing a completely different relationship with uncertainty and loss. I showed you the casino dealer who feels nothing about individual hands because they understand probability. They know the edge plays out over time, so any single hand is irrelevant. I showed you the surgeon who can execute under the highest pressure because they've separated their identity from outcomes they can't fully control. They care deeply, but they're not destroyed by variance. Then we broke down this skill into 3 core components. Component 1, thinking in probabilities instead of certainties, understanding that your edge plays out over many trades, not one, releasing the need to know what will happen, and embracing uncertainty as part of the process. Component 2, redefining loss as neutral information instead of personal failure. Separating your self-worth from your profit and loss. Seeing losses as the expected normal cost of doing business, not as evidence of your inadequacy. Component 3, pre-accepting all outcomes before you enter. Making peace with loss before it happens. focusing exclusively on what you can control, your process, your risk, your response, not on what you can't control, the market's behavior. And finally, I gave you the three-statement protocol, a practical tool you can use before every single trade to start developing this skill immediately. Probability acknowledgement, outcome acceptance, process commitment. This isn't theory. This isn't abstract philosophy. This is a trainable skill that you can develop starting today. Now, I need you to hear this. Really hear it. Because it's the truth you've been searching for. You are not broken. You don't lack discipline or intelligence or talent. You've simply been operating with the wrong framework. You've been trying to control uncertainty instead of accepting it. You've been merging your identity with your outcomes instead of separating them. You've been judging yourself on individual trades instead of thinking probabilistically. But starting today, you can develop the one skill that changes everything. The ability to execute your edge without emotional attachment to any single outcome. This skill makes loss irrelevant. And when loss is irrelevant, when it can't hurt you, when it can't trigger destructive behaviors, losing money becomes nearly impossible. You already have everything you need. You don't need more strategies. You don't need more indicators. You don't need more screen time or more courses or more information. You need to develop this psychological skill. And you can start right now with your very next trade. The traders who win consistently aren't smarter than you. They're not braver. They're not special. They haven't been blessed with some magical ability. They've just developed this skill that you're now learning. They've made the shift from gambler to dealer, from anxious to neutral, from attached to free. And that freedom, that psychological freedom to execute without fear, without attachment, without your identity on the line, that's what you've been searching for all along. That's what makes trading sustainable. That's what makes it possible to execute your edge day after day, year after year without burning out or blowing up. If this video gave you that moment of clarity, that feeling of, oh, this is what's been missing, this is why I've been struggling, I need you to do something for me. Hit the like button. Not for me, not for my ego, but for the algorithm that will show this to other traders who are suffering in silence right now. Traders who think they're the only ones struggling with this. Traders who believe they just need one more indicator or one more strategy when what they really need is this skill. Leave a comment with just one word. The emotion you feel most often when trading. Is it fear? Is it anxiety? Is it hope? Is it frustration? Is it dread? I want to see where you're starting from, because that self-awareness is the first step toward developing this skill. And subscribe to this channel, because if what I'm teaching resonates with you, if you're tired of the endless technical obsession and you're ready to do the real psychological work that actually matters, then you need to be here for the next video where we go even deeper into how your mind works in the market and how to rewire it for success. Remember this, the market doesn't care about your feelings. The market is completely neutral. But your feelings determine everything about how you execute. They determine whether you follow your plan or abandon it. They determine whether you take good setups or skip them. They determine whether you manage risk properly or let it spiral out of control. Master this skill, develop this ability to be psychologically free from individual outcomes, and trading becomes simple. It becomes almost boring. It becomes a process you can execute day after day without emotional chaos. Ignore this skill. Keep trying to fix everything with more technical knowledge, and you'll struggle forever. You'll be stuck in that cycle of hope and fear, of wins that make you feel like a genius, and losses that make you question everything. The choice is yours, but now you know what the real work is. Now you know what separates the 5% from the 95%. It's not intelligence. It's not access to information. It's this one psychological skill, and you can start building it today.